Welcome back, AP. Welcome back to it. Welcome back to your flipped classroom. We're going to pick right where we left off in our last class, talking about that glorious revolution, right? Talking about the glorious revolution and the bloodless overthrow of the King of England, James II, by his daughter and his daughter's husband, right? William of Orange. Now, this is going to play really, really well into a lot of different things that we're talking about in this flip, right? Now, I say a lot of different things, but I'm not even kidding y'all. We have to cover like 4 slides of material. It's really not even that much, right? So we just have to get our way into getting into our next unit, right? Our next unit, which is all going to be about the Age of Genius, right? The scientific revolution, as well as the Enlightenment period, right? So the big thing that you need to understand about it, though, is that William and Mary and their bloodless ascension to the throne of England was known as that glorious revolution, right? Of course, mostly going down due to the fact that their dad, well, not their dad, her dad, right? So, like, her dad having a huge issue being an open Catholic monarch who has a son that will actually create a system of secession where this son, who is now also openly Catholic, will try to come to power, right? To avoid this, the Parliament decides to run this man out, and William shows up with an army, William of Orange, husband of Mary Stuart, James's daughter, shows up with an army. The army abandons James, and he rows himself on over to France. Now, not the whole way. He gets picked up along the way. But the big thing about it, though, in general, is that this ascension will cement forever into a traditionary sense of English government as no absolutists here, right? Absolutism and the experiment of absolutism failed miserably within England, right? And the Glorious Revolution will bring around a massive new set of reforms, right? Power split evenly between the Parliament and King. Parliament's going to be called officially once every 3 years because remember, y'all, a lot of y'all were asking about the Triennial Act yesterday. You got to remember that there was a period in time where they had no king, so acts like the Triennial Act kind of went away under the Commonwealth period of Cromwell, right? But this solidifies it, cements it, re-ratifies the Triennial Act, and makes it the Parliament must be called once every 3 years at the bare minimum. But in the long run, Parliament's called every single year, okay? Like, it is called every single year, but this document is just going to allow them to actually kind of make sure that it gets called. And then another big thing that's going to happen is the ratification of the English Bill of Rights, right? The English Bill of Rights, which was inspired by John Locke, a guy we'll talk about here in a second, right? Inspired by the movements of many Enlightenment thinkers that were coming around during this time period. Because remember, in the background, we got the Enlightenment starting and the scientific revolution had already began, okay? But the English Bill of Rights will give a massive set of different rights to English people, including rights that we actually have inside the United States of America now, in like freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of free and participatory government, right? Things like that, okay? Something that you also need to understand in the long run is that the English Bill of Rights will be the actual kind of like Magna Carta 3.0, right? It went Magna Carta, Petition of Right, English Bill of Rights, right? These 3 documents work in triumvirance with each other to create a system in England of actually fair and equal political government with checks and balances systems between the king and the parliament, okay? Now, this is going to now serve as a model for other Enlightenment thinkers being like, look, England figured it out. Let's do that thing, all right? So going forward, also, law could not be suspended by the crown whatsoever, which is a big thing that's going to happen under, of course, Charles and his 11 years of tyranny. And it's also kind of a backhanded slap at Cromwell, right? Because he suspended a lot of laws when actually he was in power as well. And then also, the crown could not interfere with a debate or session of Parliament, period. That is why when the House of Commons meets, they shut the doors, right? Because open the door in the name of the king will never happen ever again. It's very important to remember that and understand it in the long run, okay? Now, jumping straight back into it, isn't that a cool scene, right? Where, like, you take the black round, they're like, dang, dang, dang. So now going into it, though, in general, it's something else you need to understand, by the way, is that also this movement and all these things are going to inspire other thinkers that come along and kind of continue that entire Enlightenment process, right? John Locke is another big one, okay? When you talk about the Enlightenment, 9 times out of 10, you talk about some of its earliest thinkers, right? 2 of its earliest thinkers came out of England during this tumultuous and crazy and over-the-top moment of, the English Civil War, the Glorious Revolution, the Commonwealth period under Cromwell, and things of the like, right? Now, we had our Thomas Hobbes thing already, right? Thomas Hobbes and his Leviathan and his idea that society will be destroyed by the disgusting people that live inside of it. So, like, going into it, though, we now have the other side of the coin, right? Whereas Hobbes is this, John Locke is this, right? He is the flip side of that coin. He actually defends people's political ideas, their rights to free and participatory government, their right to life, their right to liberty, and their right to the pursuit of property, right? So a big thing about it, though, is John Locke takes the social contract idea that Thomas Hobbes came up with, and he changes it, right? He says, no, we do not have to give our rights over to some tyrant, some like what you look for, Machiavellian, benevolent ruler or whatever. And he brings along the idea that people are born with a certain set of rights. Natural and inalienable rights, okay? Try and spell that word in your notes. Inalienable rights, okay? Because I'm going to ask a warm-up question about that. Natural and inalienable rights are rights that you are born with and should never be taken away from you, and they can't be, because if any ruler tries to do it, you have the people have the right to revolt against them. That's his social contract, right? You cannot touch my right to life. You cannot touch my right to liberty, which is my freedom of choice. And you cannot touch my right to my pursuit of property, because things I have are things that belong to me, and I have the right to own them outright, okay? So this is a big thing. His natural rights idea that he wrote in his book called The Second Treatise on Civil Government is going to be a massive thing, because he, instead of saying give your rights to an absolutist like Thomas Hobbes said in his social contract, he takes a social contract and says, no. It is the job of the government to protect the rights that I am born with. And if they don't, I will rebel, destroy that government, and start a brand new one. Does anyone have a wild guess what this guy helped inspire? None other than the American Revolution, right? That's why Thomas Jefferson, when he wrote the Declaration of Independence and also the Constitution and also had editing purposes within the Bill of Rights as well later on, is going to encourage that idea of life, liberty, but he doesn't say the pursuit of property, he says the pursuit of happiness, right? Now, going into it, though, as well, something that you need to understand is all this craziness and all this intense stuff that was going on in England, inspiring the Enlightenment, stuff like that. We got to hit the rewind button right now, right? We got to go like, and then we got to go rewind, and we got to go back in time a little bit, okay? And we're now moving into what was going on in the Netherlands, okay? So there was a lot of stuff going on in the Netherlands, just like there was a lot of stuff going on in England during this time period, right? So we're rewinding all the way back to the early-ish 1600s, right? The 1600s, while basically the 30 Years' War is still raging, Cromwell is fighting like Charles I in the English Civil War. You got a lot of crazy stuff going on, okay? But the Dutch Republic is going to be very, very important because we've also been talking about them this entire time. We started off the whole conversation with the 80 Years' War, right? The 80 Years' War in our last unit is the war between Spain and the Netherlands, where they wanted to create their own independent state, right? Well, the thing about it is, though, is quick review, they are going to win their independence from Spain and Philip II, right? They're going to win it outright in 1648 when the Treaty of Westphalia formally recognizes the 12 provinces of the Netherlands, right? Now, why is this so significant? It's so significant due to the fact that the Dutch are going to become major economic players, they're going to become major religious reformers, and they're also going to become major beacons going forward to things that different constitutional systems will strive for, right? Because they are going to enter into what is known as a Dutch Golden Age, right? And the idea of the Dutch Republic in the 17th century, which is the 1600s, right, is going to be a symbol of the dying aristocracy and the rising gentry class. Now, really, really quickly, let's talk about the phrase dying aristocracy real quick, okay? The power that they had and have always had is dying out. They themselves are not dying out. We still, to this day, have lords and earls and barons and dukes in places like England and other areas as well. They still have a House of Lords, right? So the aristocracy is something that still is a specter out there that kind of still lurks around a little bit, but they don't have the same power that they used to have, right? During the Middle Ages and going into the earliest parts of the 1500s and going into the 1600s, the nobles had a massive amount of power, as we already know. Had massive land holdings. The feudal system is what they clung to. But as merchants and merchant guilds and trading and joint stock companies begin to rise up in power as well, we see a rising gentry class, aka a merchant/agricultural middle class, right? We have somebody coming up through the woodwork that is now growing and challenging a lot of these aristocrats for their power, right? And so the Dutch Republic was ruled over and ran much more by these different people. And that merchant class is going to start taking over and start actually creating a representative government in a constitutional system. And it is going to lead to them having a massively large golden age, right? Well, not a massively large one. It only lasted for about like 75 years. But they're going to have a golden age, right? And another example of this kind of rising gentry class is that of the Glorious Revolution, right? James was losing his effective ability to try and encourage aristocrats to support him, and no longer will the aristocrats support him anymore because that merchant class is growing, right? So the thing about it is, it's going to help lead to the construction of the Netherlands, right? The Netherlands and their growth and their beauty and the beautifulness that is the Dutch society even in this day, right? And the golden age of the Netherlands is going to happen right during that 80 Years' War, because due to the fact that, like, Spain was also fighting in the 30 Years' War, and as y'all know, that the last 30 years of the 80 Years' War was the 30 Years' War, right? So the thing about it, though, is that even during the late 1500s, going into the mid to upper 1600s, right around when the Glorious Revolution happened, you have the golden age of the Netherlands, right? You had no kings in the Netherlands whatsoever. They are the first people to come along. They're like, monarchs, get the heck out of here, bro. We got a Prince of Orange. What about that? Which is like kind of the person that's the representative of the aristocrat, and he's usually the stadtholder and stuff like that. They're like, no. Our government is ran by a constitutional system of a legislative body that passes all of our laws for us, right? They elected regents from each one of these areas, right? Each of the 12 districts of the Netherlands would elect a regent, and they represented like each province in this thing called the States General, right? States General, not Estates General, that's in France, okay? But the States General in the Netherlands was a massive elected legislative body that actually carried forward and actually like propagated and encouraged the ideas and the infrastructure of the Netherlands and its people to actually grow and increase the number and like growth of that middle class, right? They wanted to create a society where people could make good money, right? Where they could actually do this really well. They wanted to limit poverty, and they wanted to grow and expand their society, right? And of course, this is going to lead them into their golden age, right? So this is also, though, going to be ruled over by this person called a stadtholder, right? And they're kind of like a prime minister, an executive, basically a military leader, and it's 9 times out of 10 the Prince of Orange, right? And the Prince of Orange is why they have 2 different flags. So the Netherlands have the royal flag, and then they also have an orange flag that helps represent the aristocrats and stuff like that. And another big thing, though, biggest reason why these Dutch people are going to have this fantastic growth is because they're the first people to come around and be like, you know what? You're Protestant, you're Catholic, you're Jewish, you're anything. You have safe haven here, right? That's a big deal, right? The idea that they are having a massive immigration and a safe haven for all these different groups of people that were ran out of other countries, that is huge, because who are the people that are going there? The smartest of the smart, the most intelligent, and they're moving there with all of their money and funds to actually encourage the growth of the economic development of the Netherlands, right? So you've got huge amounts of religious tolerance, and all religions were accepted there, even though the bulk of the population of the Dutch people were Calvinists, right? And you can see that actually right here, okay? Because the Calvinists are going to kind of really encourage and hold on to that Protestant work ethic idea in the Netherlands, and they're going to be like, we are here to benefit off of each other, and regardless of what your faith is, we are here to help make money, right? So like now, looking at this entire thing, look at the simplistic value of the room and stuff like that. Just the needs and the ideas of like eating well and stuff like that, not being as gaudy or like as very showy and stuff like that with their wealth and things. And so these Calvinist ideas are going to start ruling over the ideas of the Netherlands. And in this safe haven, in this religiously tolerant area where new companies and groups and merchants and middle class men are taking over, look at how beautiful of a place it creates. They also expand a canal system that's over 400 miles long. They reclaim marshes to farm on. They go through a massive upheaval of good times, right? Their commercial progress is huge because the Dutch East India Company grew so quickly and got involved in that East Indian spice trade, and the profits were cornered in the shipping market. They were the largest shipbuilders in all of continental Europe at the time. And just look at the beautiful effects that it has on their country. Look at the system of canals and waterways that are built in these 12 provinces that are used to reclaim land and farm more things and give more people work and create more financial success. Fun fact, write this down. They invented the stock market in the Netherlands during this time period. That's bananas, right? The thing that we still use as a representation of like economic value was invented in the Netherlands during this time. And y'all just look at how beautiful Amsterdam is. Like, just look at how gorgeous it is. It looks like a big box of crayons. This is Amsterdam in the evening, and you can take like little cruises on boats through the canals and stuff like that. It's where Anne Frank was from. It's where some of their best artwork came out of. And I'm getting ahead of myself, y'all. But why is it looking this beautiful? Because of the commercial progress that the Netherlands is seeing, right? The Dutch East India coming around and like kind of helping colonize and grow their entire areas, bringing in spices and other trade market items, and being the place that can actually ship not east and west, but north and south as well, right? They were a mecca of economic progress, right? Now, the thing about it in general, we'll talk about these guys, tulips, here in a second. Helping you understand it. And the prosperity is going to drive not only commercial progress, success in the building of new cities and canals, it's also going to drive forward innovation. This right here was actually invented by Roger van der Heyden, right? So he is a Dutch scientist, and he invented longer burning wicks, and he also even invented portable pumping devices to use as a fire squad to put out fires when they would break out in the Netherlands. Look at that. That invention was inspired and paid for by Dutch merchants. It's like the Dutch had a mini renaissance, right? A mini renaissance where people patron these good works, right? Van der Heyden also invented longer burning wicks that could go onto street lamps throughout Holland and stuff like that, and throughout the Netherlands, to make it so it would help reduce crime, right? Because you could actually see people trying to like steal or commit crimes in the night, right? And then also it's going to drive forward the growth in art. Y'all, the biggest growth in art that you've probably ever seen in a short amount of time, right? Some of the biggest ones being Johannes Vermeer, right? This is The Milkmaid by Johannes Vermeer, and you know another very famous, very beautiful, very gorgeous piece by Johannes Vermeer, and it's The Girl with the Pearl Earring. All right, so, and literally, the girl with the pearl earring. All right, so yeah, pearl earring. Come on, where are you at? All right, so there we go. The girl with the pearl earring is one of Vermeer's most famous works of art. She was a servant girl that actually worked in his home and stuff like that. And she had, well, it's definitely not that one. That's completely different. But like, it's a servant girl that worked in his home, and it's actually still housed inside the Netherlands at the Rijksmuseum Museum, which is absolutely beautiful and stuff like that. That has most of Vermeer's most famous works, and it's coming out of that Dutch Golden Age, right? It's being inspired, and like that little mini Renaissance is growing and prospering and things like that. And you're also seeing the growth of other major works of art as well, like this one by, where you at? All right, so like this one right here by one of the most famous Dutch Golden Age artists, Rembrandt, right? That right there is the Night Watch, right? The Night Watch, which I'm going to drop a video also in the description of a flash mob doing this Night Watch, which is really, really cool. But the Night Watch is a massive painting. Rembrandt's most famous work, it's 12 by 14 feet. It's absolutely massive, and it shows active movement in the movement of a militia during like the entire thing. And we'll look at it some more in class and stuff like that. But then I got one more thing to talk to y'all about. One more thing, and it deserves a title, and we're just going to go ahead and fly through it, and then we'll talk about it some more when I actually like show back up in class. Where you at? There we go. We got to talk about Prussia, right? Okay, so go ahead and give me a title, okay? And it says Prussia at the top of it, right? P-R-U-S-S-I-A, all right? So now, the big thing you need to understand about Prussia is that they are going to leave a massive impact going forward on the progression of European history. So something that you need to understand about them, too, is that they get on the absolutist train as well. But Mr. Terry, why are we talking about them after the Dutch and after the Dutch Netherlands and after the Dutch Golden Age and stuff like that? Because they're a little bit like Russia in the sense that they got into absolutism a little bit late. Well, now some of y'all are like, well, I thought Ivan Terrible was the first absolutist. He is. But what I meant is more like Peter the Great absolutist era, right? So Prussia comes along, spelled P-R-U-S-S-I-A. They are basically baby Germany. And their first absolutist king is a man by the name of Frederick William the First. Now, really quickly, okay, let's talk about his last name. Write his last name down because this family in Prussia will rule over not only Prussia but also other German-speaking states going forward for a huge amount of time. His last name is, spell it like this, Hohenzollern, Hohenzollern, right? Now, really quickly, how did this guy come to power? Well, a lot of it has to do with his grandfather, right? His grandfather was one of those 7 electors, okay? The 7 electors that picked the Holy Roman Emperor and stuff. But after the waning of the 30 Years' War and when it was coming to an end and people were realizing that the Holy Roman Emperor didn't have as much power, he is going to use his power as an elector to grow his lands and things like that. And he is originally from a place called Brandenburg, and then Prussia was an area that was out towards Poland. So he actually uses marriages of convenience to create a system where Prussia is created officially on the map, right? Now, their first absolutist king that comes along, though, is this man right here, Frederick William or Frederick Wilhelm I, also known as the Soldatenkönig, right? The soldier's king, all right? So he is their first absolutist, and the biggest thing he has to deal with is just like every absolutist that comes along, his nobles, right? When he comes to power, he has to deal with these people called the Junkers, right? And Junkers, spelled Junkers, are Prussian nobles. Just like we got boyars over in Russia, we got robe and swords over in France, and we got also, what do we got? Oh, we got all these like lords as well over in England, right? But the Junkers out in Prussia are going to refuse to enact some initiatives by him, so he's going to figure this whole thing out. Some big initiatives that he wants to do, like for example, he wants to grow wealth, he wants to grow infrastructure, he wants to create more roads, he wants to increase taxes and stuff to do this. Well, the Junkers begin to refuse him, right? So his solution, I'll make more money in a different way. Instead of listening to you and taxing you more, how about I blow these doors wide open? And I allow any Protestant, any Catholic, any person of any religion to immigrate into Prussia and bring their money with them. Just like the Dutch did, right? And remember how many people are moving all over Europe trying to find safe haven during this time period. You got Huguenots coming from France after the Edict of Nantes was revoked by Louis XIV. You got Calvinists coming from Switzerland. You got Puritans bebopping around all over the place, right? So he opens those doors wide open and says, y'all, religious tolerance. Come here, bring your money, bring your business. I'll tax y'all instead. So yeah, and they come happily seeking safe haven, right? He begins to tax them, and what does he use it to do? Create the biggest military that the German-speaking people have ever seen. Something you need to understand about Frederick William, the reason why it's called the Soldatenkönig is because it means the soldier king, right? He creates a military state devoid of any parliament or local self-government, and he becomes the chief absolutist and the leader of the military, right? He uses the size and breadth of the Prussian military to create a system known as Prussian militarism, right? He elects Junkers as military officers. Those serving nobles outranked non-serving nobles. Absolute genius. If you were a noble that served in the military underneath the Soldatenkönig, it was his form of the table of ranks. You were doing something for him, so you moved up in the ranks, right? And so non-serving nobles that didn't serve in the military, you didn't get listened to anymore. And it's the same for citizens as well. If you, were just a regular person, if Katie Scuderi served in the Prussian military, she was ranked above other ones who did not, right? He creates a Prussian military state. And write that down really quick, militarism. He actually kind of creates the idea of this very intense Prussian military state. He had the 12th largest population and the 4th largest army. And not just the largest by size, but the largest in height as well, right? That right there is known as a Potsdam giant. He actually created an entire sector of the military that had soldiers that were all over 6 feet tall. He dressed them fantastically in great uniforms, gave them standard issue military weapons, and gave them really tall hats too that made them look even bigger in battle. So going into it though as well, you have to understand he had the 12th largest population in all of Soldatenkönig. After his grandfather creates this system and kind of gives him the power and land, he has the 12th largest population, but the 4th largest army, right? An 80,000 standing army at all times, right? But being the 12th biggest country in the entire area. That's huge, right? So he creates a huge military system, and we see German militarism showing up, right? Because he is a German-speaking person, and he shows up, and there are all these slogans that start popping up about Prussia. There are sayings about them that start running around Europe about Prussians and how much they love their military. And for example, they always used to say, Prussia is not a state that has an army. They're an army that happens to have a state. And my favorite one is what Napoleon said about them. Long after this, over 100 years later, Napoleon would say that Prussia hatched out of a cannonball, right? That is very important, and that is the absolutism unit, y'all. Y'all have a good one. Enjoy yourselves. I'll talk to y'all soon.